Welcome. Thanks, Gavin. As Gavin has suggested, tonight's talk is about Hillsborough Parish Church. So it's a virtual tour of the graveyard, and I'll be calling it 20 graves in the graveyard. And so to your left there's one of the men features there. That's Frank Pantridge. In the middle then is Canon Barry. He'll also feature, and then to the right then is Hamilton Hardy. He'll also feature. So Hillsborough Parish Church, also known as St Malachy's, it dates back to 1663. The current church was completed in 1773 by Wills Hill, the first Marquess of Downshire, and the adjoining graveyard dates from the same period. We'll say 20 graves. This is the first one. You'll see at the top there, in first interment in this, or sorry, you might be able to see at the top, there's a family coat of arms, and then it says the first interment in this grave, the first interment in this grave is James Hume, and it says of the family of Home of Berwickshire, born at Aberfour in Fife, 1718, was ordained Presbyterian minister of Moira, January 3rd, 1753, and died at Beachfield in this parish, October 12th, 1782. So that's just the top of the headstone there, just below the headstone lies horizontal on the ground. Amongst those also commemorated on this huge headstone, you can maybe see in the middle there, John Kennedy. And it says their second son was murdered by the bushrangers January 15th, 1884. A bushranger was a thief who lived in the Australian bush, often stealing expensive items from banks or coaches. The headstone also commemorates, directly below John's entry there, Andrew, their third son, was killed in boyhood, and then it also commemorates a child at the bottom, and that's a child of one of their sisters, John Simpson. It says at the bottom there, her only child died January the 17th, 1845, from a kick of his horse. So that's just just above the dates there, as you'll see, from a kick of his horse. So quite a bit of unusual information on that grave. But I say and they lived in a place called Home in Berwickshire in Scotland. So that was the first one. The second one is this headstone, and if you go in a bit closer, you can see sacred to the memory of William Taylor, Esquire, Senior Inspector of the Royal Irish Constabulary, who died at Hillsborough on 4th November 1870. And then it continues, this stone is erected by his brothers and sisters who loved him, and also contains the following text: to them and to a large circle of friends, he was endeared by many amiable qualities, that's easy for me to say, and it was very much respected for his conscientiousness and efficient discharge of his public duties. William Taylor was born in County Dublin in 1830, and he was employed with the Belfast Bank in Dundalk before entering Trinity College in Dublin. He was appointed a senior RIC inspector on 12th August 1853, and in December 1870, in other words after his death, his effects of under £1,000 were granted to his next of kin, Nathaniel Taylor, who lived at Mulla in County Cavan. The next headstone is proof that I needed to prep this talk a bit better, because it is a Muirhead grave, and you'll see in the middle there Robert Cowson Muirhead, who died at Cleone, Switzerland in 1895, aged 21. And there's also someone who was born at Killilay below that, his wife Helen Heron Muirhead. But I actually thought there's another Muirhead grave headstone in the cemetery, and I took the wrong photograph of the wrong Muirhead headstone. The other one, which I haven't got a photograph of, was erected in loving memory of Barbara Elizabeth Muirhead, died November 1888, interred at Ruhart in Germany, and of John Muirhead, who died in December 1857. Also Robert Bradshaw Muirhead, who died June 3rd, 1903, buried at Bubbling Well Cemetery in Shanghai. So quite a few air miles on that headstone, which I don't have a photograph of. Ruhrhard is a district within the German city of Duisburg, situated north of the confluence of the Ruhr and the Rhine in the western part of the Ruhr Valley. Ruhrhard has the largest river harbour in the world, even bigger than Donaghadee, with quays extending nearly 40 kilometres along the river. That's the principal inland shipping port in Germany. Bubbling Well Cemetery opened in 1888 and closed in 1951 after more than 5,000 burials and more than 1,350 cremations, and in 1954 was reclaimed for redevelopment. So in other words, it's been built over. So the next one features this mausoleum here, which is on the perimeter of one of the perimeters of the graveyard, and you'll see there's two fallen headstones. This is one of the headstones. It's quite hard to read, but it says it commemorates Anne Llewellyn, daughter of Frederick Harry Lewis, Esquire, Nettlefield, Belfast, the faithful wife and loving companion of John G. Hopkins, M.A., incumbent of Willowfield, Belfast, died 1st August 1889. So Fred Lewis served as Mayor of Belfast twice in 1854 and 1869, and he's buried in Belfast City Cemetery. His impressive house in Nettlefield was demolished many years ago, with Nettlefield Primary School subsequently built on the site. And the school's most famous former pupil is a certain George Best. The impressive headstone also commemorates John George Hopkins, AM, Clerk in Holy Orders, who for 28 years was incumbent of Willowfield Parish, Belfast, died 12th January 1900 in the 65th year of his age and in the 40th of his ministry. The neighbouring headstone, which is not in the photograph, commemorates Mary Hopkins, who departed this life at Willowfield Parsonage, Belfast, 3rd November 1880. So even though those burials are in Hillsborough, there's quite a number of references to Willowfield Parish Church. So as it says in my forthcoming Cure for Insomnia / third book, it says in that book, Willowfield Parish was where my mum and dad married in 1968. And before you work out the maths, Nigel, I was born in 1969, late 1969. And it's also where my granny and granda worshipped for many years. So that's the fourth one. Next one then, this is a base of a cross. It commemorates Albina Jane Leslie, daughter of Judge Shaw, Supreme Court, Calcutta, wife of Lieutenant General George Leslie, R.A., Royal Artillery, born October 7th, 1835, died January 20th, 1893. Yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for thou art with me. Thy rod and thy staff, they comfort me. The Supreme Court in Fort William in Calcutta was British India's highest court, claiming jurisdiction over any person residing in Bengal, Bihar, or Orissa from 1774 until 1862, when the High Court of Calcutta was established. The original building was demolished in 1782 and replaced by the present building in 1834. The only references to Judge Shaw that I can find online relate to a marriage on 1st November 1844 of Lieutenant Cecil Plowden Trower to Eliza, daughter of the late James Shaw, Esquire of Jamalpur, now Jamalpur, and a birth of Conala, the lady of James Shaw, Esquire, of a daughter, 7th April 1835. So that commemorates a family that spent quite a bit of their time many miles away from Hillsborough. So I have to thank Nigel Henderson for the next photograph, and he saved me a trip down to Hillsborough, Nigel. And this commemorates John Cleland, Sergeant, Royal Enniskillen Fusiliers, who died at Middelburg, Transvaal in South Africa, 8th of May 1901, aged 30 years. In 18, and this is still reading the text from the headstone, in 1897 to 98, he served in the campaign on the northwestern frontier, India, and in 1900 to 01 in the South African War, and received a medal for distinguished conduct in the field. So that's quite a bit of text on the headstone. The South African War, or the Boer War, or Anglo-Boer War, was from 11th of October 1899 to the 31st of May 1902, and it was fought between the British Empire and two Boer states, the South African Republic, in other words, the Republic of Transvaal, and the Orange Free State, and it was against the Empire's influence in South Africa. So the aforementioned Nigel Henderson is doing a talk about the Boer War, and it's available on, and the date of that is available on History Hub Ulster's Facebook page. Also commemorated on this headstone are two of John Cleland's brothers, Frederick Charles Cleland, who died 9th October 1901, aged 2 years, and Norman, who died 27th of August 1926. The next headstone is this one, the Reverend W.C. Steele, BA, Bachelor of Arts, BD, Bachelor of Divinity, possibly, but I'm sure Nigel will correct me. Minister of Hillsborough Presbyterian Church, born 26th December 1860, ordained 9th September 1891, and died 6th October 1914. And the headstone was erected by the ministers and elders of the Presbytery of Dromore in memory of one greatly loved by all. Reverend Steele was the 7th minister of Hillsborough Presbyterian Church, and his sudden death caused much sorrow in the congregation. His son was the Reverend Professor W.I. Steele, and he of McGee Theological College up in Derry. That was his son. The next one then, another photograph that Nigel sent me through. You might be able to see in the middle of the middle panel. It commemorates Claude Arthur Leonard Walker. He was born on the 16th of January, when all the best people are born, 1895. Imagine that, Mum, he's born the same day as you, at Moneybroom, Macrogal, Lisburn. Claude's father, Robert, was rector of St Matthew's Church, Woodfield Road in Belfast during the war. Claude joined the Public Schools Corps in August 1914 and attended the Royal Military College at Sandhurst in December 1914. He was commissioned in May 1915 and deployed to France on the 14th of July 1915. Thanks to Nigel for that information. As recorded in the headstone, 21-year-old Lieutenant Walker was serving with the 2nd Enniskillen Fusiliers, killed in action at Auvillers, France, July 10th, 1916, buried in Bouzecourt Communal Cemetery Extension in France. And that's Bouzecourt there. Lieutenant Walker is the first name on the Great War Memorial in the neighbouring parish church, and then also commemorated on this at this grave you'll see to the left, you might be able to see William Walker, husband of Margaret Walker, died April 28th, 1916, manager of gas works for 50 years. And also commemorated on the headstone is Colonel Robert Gordon Walker, DSO BA-RE, died on the 4th of September 1962. The next one then, and again thanks to Nigel for the photograph, commemorates, well, on the headstone itself, commemorates Joshua Stirrett of Dramatew in Hillsborough in the county of Down, late of Ordnance Survey, who departed this life on 12th August 1919, aged 80 years. But also his great nephew, Sergeant Pilot William E.G. Taylor, RCAF, Royal Canadian Air Force, loved and only son of George and Edith Taylor, killed in active service 6th February 1942, aged 21 years. The base of the headstone contains a representation of the Royal Canadian Air Force logo just above the little poppy cross there. Quite an impressive headstone. This one commemorates Captain, just about the middle there, Captain Samuel James Corbett Hutchison, LLD, Justice of the Peace for the County of Down. He was killed as a result of a motor accident, 28th June 1932, in his 46th year. For many years, Captain Hutchison was the director of J.B. Ferguson Limited, Chichester Street in Belfast, and also of another well-known motor engineering firm, Hutchison Hutto and Co. Limited of Oxford Street in Belfast. According to a plaque in the church vestibule, the lighting of this church was presented by his mother, sisters, and brothers, with the tablet, in quotes, placed here by his friends. His headstone also commemorates Captain Hutchison's father, Samuel Corbett Hutchison of this parish, who died 29th November 1925 in his 69th year, and his brother, Charles Herbert Hutchison, who died 3rd April 1912 in his 16th year and was interred in the city cemetery. And he's actually buried in grave H2 681 in the city cemetery. And he was living at 32 Willowbank Street in Belfast when he died. The next one, I don't have a photograph of the headstone because there isn't one, because he was cremated. Is this man, Hamilton Hardy? So to your left then. So according to another plaque in the church vestibule, Hardy was born in Hillsborough, December 4th, 1879, died February 19th, 1941. His ashes are interred in the church grounds of Hillsborough, the place he was proud to call home. So that's what the plaque in the church vestibule. The same plaque records Sir Hamilton as FRCM ONS, MUSD ONS, Trinity College Dublin, Victoria University Manchester, Paul University Chicago USA, LLD ONS, Queen's University Belfast, gold medalist of the Royal Philharmonic Society. After an early career as a church organist, so my mum was a bit of catching up to do, Hardy moved to London aged 20, soon becoming a well-known piano accompanist, with the Musical Times calling him the Prince of Accompanists. I'm sure that's not how you pronounce that. From 1920 to 1933, Hardy was the chief conductor of the Hallé Orchestra in Manchester, which he returned to the high standards and critical acclaim that it had enjoyed under its founder, Charles Hallé. His last permanent post was with the London Symphony Orchestra when he began to suffer the symptoms of a brain tumour. After surgery, he resumed his career until 1940, but the tumour sadly returned to cause his death at the age of 61. Sir Hamilton Hardy is commemorated on a blue plaque, two blue plaques actually. The one at the top commemorates Sir Hamilton Hardy, composer and conductor, died in this house on 19th of February 1941. That was erected by the Regency Society, and that plaque is in Brighton and in England, in Hove, in England, I suppose. And then the other one commemorates Sir Hamilton Hardy, 1879 to 1941, musician and composer, lived here, and that is in Balnahinch Street in Hillsborough. So in other words, just around the corner from the cemetery. So again, I don't have a photograph of this headstone because there isn't one. The next guy I'm going to talk about is Joseph Betty Lambert. He was born on the 21st of March 1883 at Rathdrum in the County Wicklow, and he was working as a linen lapper when he married Eliza Jane, known as Lila Wilson, on 20th November 1905 at the Grosvenor Hall in Belfast. He served with the 10th Battalion Royal Irish Rifles during the Great War, being discharged to Class Z Army Reserve on 16th February 1919. He was living at 57 Rowland Street in the Sandy Row area of Belfast when he was injured at Belfast Harbour during the German air raid, otherwise known as the Belfast Blitz, on 8th April 1941, and he died of his injuries at the Mater Hospital in Belfast and was buried on the 11th of April 1941. So that's a photograph there they could find of the harbour during one of the Blitz, the German air raids, and that you can see the gantries at Harnawoof there to the top left. So that photograph, I think, is from Scott Edgar's excellent Wartime NI website. Worth checking out. The next one is a Commonwealth War Grave, and it commemorates Thomas Hanna, able seaman, RN Royal Navy, HMS Drake. Died on 16th May 1947, aged 27. The base of the headstone says, "At rest, ever remembered by his loving wife, Catherine, and daughter, Doris." The HMS Drake was previously the HMS Marshal Ney. It launched in 1915. She became a base ship and was renamed HMS Vivid in 1922, HMS Drake in 1934, and then after Anna's death in 1947, she was renamed for final time HMS Aluna II, and was broken up in 1857. There's a number of other Commonwealth War graves. So also commemorated in the cemetery is Rifleman John William Gregg, a son of James and Lucy Gregg of Ballykeil, Artifinny, who died 12th October 1916, aged 27, while serving with C Company, 13th Battalion Royal Irish Rifles. Also buried in the graveyard, Sergeant Pilot William Edward George, known as Billy Taylor, a son of Edward George and Margaret Edith Taylor of Toronto, Ontario, Canada, who died on 6th February 1942, aged 21, while serving with the Royal Canadian Air Force. Another one. And then Sergeant Lieutenant W.H. Martin, who died on 27th November 1918, while serving with the King's Shropshire Light Infantry. And then finally, Gunner William John Rogan, who died 10th January 1919, aged 47, while serving with B Battery, 19th Fire Command, Royal Garrison Artillery. So say there's a number, those are a number of the Commonwealth War Graves headstones in the cemetery, but I just like that one because it's got the reference to HMS Drake and also the anchor on the headstone. As I mentioned previously in talks, the anchor is an early Christian symbol, and if it's tangled up in rope, it symbolizes death. So that's as is the case on that headstone. The next one then is a victim of the more recent troubles. You'll see there at the base of the grave, base of the headstone, sorry, it commemorates John Smith, Constable RUC, killed on duty 2nd August 1981, aged 34 years. Constable Smith was killed along with Assistant Constable Andrew Alfred Woods, who was aged 50, in a landmine attack on their mobile patrol at Loch Magrory near Omagh in County Tyrone. So the first interment in this grave is John's grandfather, right, who died on 11th March 1927, and then his grandmother Sarah Ann, who died on 17th February 1933, and their daughter Elizabeth Mary, possibly John's mother, who died on 28th April 1968. So the next one is also an RUC victim of the Troubles, and it's this man. You'll see the RUC logo at the top, and that's the headstone was erected in loving memory of her dear husband, Father Dennis Bunting, died tragically 2nd of June 1984, aged 39 years, in a helicopter disaster in the Mull of Kintyre. So Bunting was killed when a Royal Air Force Chinook helicopter crashed in foggy conditions resulting in the deaths of all 25 passengers and 4 crew on board. Among the passengers were almost all of the United Kingdom's senior Northern Ireland intelligence experts. The accident is the RAF's worst peacetime disaster. In 1995, an RAF Board of Inquiry ruled that it was impossible to establish the exact cause of the accident. This ruling was subsequently overturned by 2 senior reviewing officers who stated that the pilots were guilty of gross negligence for flying too fast and too low in thick fog. This finding proved to be controversial, and in 2011, an independent review of the crash cleared the crew of negligence. This grave also contains the remains of Dennis's father, Stanley, who's commemorated as a beloved husband and father, died 17th February 1996, so less than 2 years after his son Dennis. So another victim of the disaster will feature in the forthcoming book about Roselawn, and that's Flight Lieutenant Jonathan Paul Tapper, and he was one of the crew. And also I noticed recently the grave of a man with the surname of William, and that's in Grey Abbey. Davy Lamb was with me that day when I saw that. So this, thanks to my friend John for sending this. This is he was a close colleague and friend of Dennis Bunting, and this is the front cover of the order of service for Dennis's funeral, which took place in the church before St Malachy's, before he was then interred in the adjoining graveyard. It's very sad and early loss of life, sadly. This is the next one. That is the angle that the headstone sits at. So I wasn't on the Cronenberg when I took this photograph. You'll see there it commemorates Beaumont and with their address in it, Navigation House in Lisburn, and it commemorates Hilda Elsie Margaret Beaumont ní Crampton, born Durban, South Africa, 3rd February 1923, died Lisburn, 25th September 2000. So Navigation House, it says there in the second line, was once the home of the Lagan Canal manager in the days when coal lighters plied the Lagan walkway. It was opened in 1763. This is the waterway, sorry, and closed in 1958. The Lagan navigation travelled 27 miles from Belfast to Lough Neagh with a total of 27 locks. Navigation House was built in 1866 for the Lagan Canal manager, but was sold in the 1950s when the last superintendent, Michael Wallace Kidd, moved out. Since 2015, the historical building, which sits beside Lisburn's 4 Union locks, the only staircase lock in Ireland, has been the headquarters of the Lagan Canal Trust. There's the photograph there. So it's, as I said there, it's just behind the very overgrown Union locks. And for anybody that remembers the Tidied Offer, if you were coming from the Tidied Offer back into Lisburn, you come down that road and that house sits directly in front of you near Spruce Field. The next one then is this one, Gary Jess. And you'll see he's remembered as a loving husband of Paula and father of Gary Jr. Died tragically, Ulster Grand Prix, 17th of August 2002, aged 31 years. He was a painter and decorator from Moira, and he crashed his Yamaha 750 at Deers Leap in Dundrod in the opening superbike race and was struck by another rider, suffering serious head injuries and dying at the scene. His wife Paula, who was 6 months pregnant at the time, was at the event. Gary was one of Northern Ireland's most promising riders, and in 1989 won 5 national road races: Cookstown, Tandragee, Kells, Mid Antrim and Carradore. So as pictured, the Gary Jess Trophy is presented every year at the races at the Ulster Grand Prix. So obviously it didn't happen last year, and I wouldn't imagine it happened it'll happen this year. And the trophy there, you can see an image of Gary on the actual trophy. 3 more to go before your suffering will end. And if you look to the left of this on the side panel, it commemorates James Francis Puntridge, CBE MC FRCP, died 26th December 2004, aged 88 years. This is Frank Puntridge here. He was born in Hillsborough on the 3rd October 1918, and he was educated at Friends School in Lisburn and then at Queen's University. He graduated in medicine in 1939. During the Second World War, he served in the British Army and was commissioned into the Royal Army Medical Corps as a lieutenant on 12th April 1940. He was awarded the MC, as it says in his headstone, the Military Cross, during the fall of Singapore, when he was, quote, absolutely cool under the heaviest of fire, quote, and then became a prisoner of war, serving much of his captivity as a slave labourer on the Burma Railway. He suffered from ill health for the rest of his life. After Puntridge's liberation, he worked as a lecturer in the pathology department at Queen's, and then won a scholarship to the University of Michigan. He was appointed as cardiac consultant to the Royal Victoria Hospital in Belfast in 1950 and professor at Queen's University, where he remained until his retirement in 1982. He went on to develop the portable defibrillator and in 1965 installed his first version in a Belfast ambulance. Being Belfast, of course, it'll be referred to as an ambulance. The defibrillator weighed 70 kilograms and was operated by car batteries. But by 1968, he had designed an instrument weighing only 3 kilograms and incorporating a miniature capacitator manufactured for NASA. Belfast treatment system, often known as the Puntridge Plan, became adopted throughout the world by emergency medical services. The portable defibrillator became recognized as a key tool in first aid, and Puntridge's refinement of the automated external defibrillator, AED, allowed it to be used safely by members of the public. Puntridge was appointed Commander of the Order of the British Empire, CBE, in the 1979 New Year's Honours, and a statue of Puntridge now stands outside the Lagan Valley Island Centre in Lisburn. So that's pictured, there to the left, and there's the defibrillator sitting beside him. The photograph in the middle, the image in the middle, that will feature in my forthcoming 2020 book. That was done by my friend David Francis, and then the book to the image to the bottom right then is the front cover of his best-selling autobiography. It says An Unquiet Life. Surly, I think, is the word, man, apparently, and I think both the sketch and the front cover of the book display that quite well, because he was surly because of his experiences, I think, in Burma and his torture, etc. there. Only 2 more to go, and this unusual headstone features as you come into the cemetery on the right, and it commemorates John Barry, 1915 to 2006, rector of Hillsborough, 1949 to 1983, and also his wife Eileen Barry, 1916 to 2008. John Barry attended Trinity College, Dublin, where he received a degree in philosophy in 1938. He was ordained, this is him here, he was ordained deacon that year and priest in 1939, serving his first curacy in St Matthew's, Belfast, until 1941. He was then curate in St Mark's, Dundela, and then moved to Dunluce in County Antrim as rector in in 1945. In 1949, he was appointed to Hillsborough, where he was rector until he retired. During those 34 years, he was also canon of St Anne's Cathedral in Belfast from 1956 to 64, and Chancellor of Down Cathedral 1964 to 1973. In 1942, he married Ellen Margaret Oulton from Bray, County Wicklow, and they had 3 sons. Jonathan, who was a rector in St Mary's, Cumber, for nearly 33 years until 2018. They also had David and Simon. In 1970, the bells of Hillsborough Parish Church were augmented by 2 new treble bells to mark Canonbarry's 21 years as rector. The bells were named John and Jonathan after the rector and his son, who were both enthusiastic ringers. Canonbarry was a regular contributor to the Church of Ireland Gazette, where he wrote under the pen name of Cromlin, which is the former name of Hillsborough. After he died, Archbishop Robin Eames said, "In his passing, our church mourns one of its most significant pastors and servants, who in retirement continued to remind us all of those values which endure." That's Canon John Barry. The last one then is this one, and you see it commemorates William Muntz, known as Bill Salters, MBE, and he was born on 10th December 1929 and died 25th of January 2014, and you can see the base of the headstone just says "at rest." He's commemorated there in the headstone, as we said, as a devoted husband, father and grandfather. According to his online death notice, Bill was late of Kilcavy in Hillsborough. He was a dearly loved son, dearly loved husband of Irene, dearly loved father of Pamela, Hilary, Irene, Alison, Richard and Graham, dear father-in-law, and a loving grandfather and great-grandfather. Bill was the Deputy Chief Vehicle Examiner in the Department of the Environment when he received his MBE in 1988. So that does 2 things. It reminds me that I need to put my car in for an MOT, and it also brings this evening's talk to a close. So of course I'll mention my forthcoming, as I mentioned earlier, Cure for Insomnia. That's the front cover there, and you'll see it at the bottom. It features 20 graves in each 20 different local cemeteries. So I did sign off the final copy of that on Sunday night, so it should be available, all being well, within the next fortnight. Thanks very much for listening.